Inside Florida Politics, powered by the USA Today Florida Network. The race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris is tightening in Florida. Polling shows ballot measures on marijuana and abortion could struggle to pass, and voting is underway for the August 20th primary. Hello, I'm USA Today campaign reporter Zac Anderson, and those are some of the stories I'll be discussing this week with Palm Beach Post reporter Wayne Washington and Daytona Beach News Journal reporter Mark Harper. Welcome, Mark and Wayne. Let's jump right into the news this week. We got two new polls released in recent days showing Kamala Harris within striking distance in Florida, despite the state's rightward tilt in recent years. We had a USA Today Suffolk University survey that found Harris trailing Trump by 5 points in the state, while a Florida Atlantic University poll has Harris only down by 3. Mark, I guess I wonder, are you surprised that the race is so close? Republicans now have 1 million more voters in Florida than Democrats.
Yeah, Zach, I'm not really that surprised, given the momentum shift since President Joe Biden dropped out. The Democratic ticket under Vice President Kamala Harris has brought out an energy we haven't seen from Democratic voters, including those in Florida, in a long time. But I'm skeptical of these polls a bit. The FAU poll shows the race is even closer if Robert Kennedy Jr. is in the mix.
Yeah, 2 points instead of 3, right?
Yeah, I think it's Trump 47, Harris 45, RFK Jr. 5.
Yeah.
But Republicans have dominated statewide elections in Florida and have a significant advantage over Democrats in voter registration, and that would seem to be more salient, I guess, than any of the dozens of polls of 1,000 voters or so that will be taken over the next 12 or 13 weeks.
Right.
And
I think one thing people are wondering, Mark, when you look at the 2022 race between DeSantis and Charlie Crist, that's a midterm election, but it was a blowout, 19 percentage points. And people were wondering, has Florida really gone far to the right? This seems like a reversion more towards what we saw towards the end of 2020 when Trump won by 3 percentage points. That yes, the state has gone more red, but it's not overwhelmingly red as some people might think.
Yeah. I think historically Florida's been a lot closer. We've seen a lot of really close statewide elections, even though Republicans have pulled them out usually. I think about the polls, I go back to thinking about how in 2020, Biden actually won the majority of these Florida polls by about a 3-1 margin, down the stretch.
Right.
And yet Trump, obviously won in Florida. So it's, Florida's probably, more red than purple, I think, at this point.
And even if it looks like it's close in the polls, to really win the state, you got to invest a lot of money, right? I mean, Florida's a massive state, over 20 million people. It takes a lot to get voters out. You could poll, these voters, but turnout is extremely important. And in order to be competitive, Harris would really have to invest in the state. So far, we haven't seen a whole lot of that, right?
I don't think the Democrats and Harris have considered Florida a winnable state, and I don't think they've treated it as as they have some of these other states like Pennsylvania and Georgia and Michigan. I think it just what's interesting about Harris is that just Democrats' enthusiasm is so high. It'll be interesting to see if she can avoid the kind of missteps that might change that momentum. next week we've got the Democratic National Convention, and she should have, a positive bounce from that. But there's still a lot of time, and every day potential for big changes are there. So
yeah, absolutely. Wayne, you're over in the Palm Beach area. Palm Beach County turned red in 2022, which I think surprised some people, as did Miami-Dade over in South Florida and some other key Florida counties. Do you think Harris can make the county competitive again?
I do. As was said previously, I think the enthusiasm for the Harris-Walz ticket is very high. And in order to be competitive in Florida for a Democrat would need to win Miami-Dade and Palm Beach County. I do believe the DeSantis blowout a couple years ago was something of an outlier. Those were very specific circumstances that led to that defeat for the Democrats in such a dramatic fashion. I'm not sure we'll see a margin like that in Florida, and therefore I don't think we'll necessarily see these typically blue counties, Miami-Dade and Palm Beach, stay red.
Right.
Florida is a solidly red state, but I think the play for the Harris ticket is not so much a play to win. It's certainly a play to be very competitive in Miami-Dade and Broward, to tighten the race in Florida, threaten to win the race in Florida. Anything, if this continues, if we continue to see polls showing a really tight race in Florida, we might begin to see the Trump campaign feel compelled to spend money here.
Right.
And that would be a big win for them, because it's one pot of money. And if you spend some of the money in a place where you should be expected to win, that's less money that you have to spend in a place that should be truly competitive. And I do think Palm Beach County and Miami-Dade will be a part of that strategy to try to drive up support and to try to make the race more competitive.
And you could argue that, Florida being more competitive in 2020 forced Trump to campaign here more, to spend money here more, and, take his eye off the ball in states like Michigan and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania that he ended up needing and ended up losing. And that was in Georgia and Arizona and some of these other states. If Harris can make him play defense here, that could still, and even if she doesn't win, if she can make it close enough that Trump feels compelled to shore up his support here, that could be huge. But bottom line is, if the Democrats aren't winning Palm Beach and Miami-Dade, they don't really have a chance, right?
No chance at all. The way to win for a Democrat in Florida is to win South Florida. That's to run up big margins in Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach County, and then hold your own, hold serve in the I-4 corridor, and understand that you're probably going to lose the northern counties of Florida. But the problem for the Democrats is they haven't been able to do that.
Right.
They've lost Miami-Dade in some races. Palm Beach County is now very, very competitive. Broward is still a big basket of votes for them. But that's the strategy if you're on Team Blue. If that's the strategy, you win South Florida, you hold serve in the middle of the state, and then you try to blunt your losses in northern Florida. And that's the ticket to win. That's been the ticket to win. I think that's still the ticket to win.
And there was a poll showing Harris doing much better in Miami-Dade than Charlie Crist did. She was winning by, I think, about 15 points or something like that, whereas Crist actually lost Miami-Dade in 2022. So I don't think 15 is still necessarily what Democrats need. I think back, when they were more competitive, it was over 20% that they were winning the county by, but certainly seems like Harris has changed the narrative in South Florida. So we'll see how that progresses as we get through the convention and into the heart of the campaign. Up next, abortion and marijuana amendments could be in trouble. These polls that were released this week also had some bad news for supporters of marijuana legislation and abortion rights. While both ballot measures are popular, they could struggle to reach the 60% approval threshold to pass. Wayne, can you walk us through the numbers and what they can mean?
Yeah, the most recent polling that I've seen showed that the marijuana ballot measure, the recreational marijuana ballot measure, is at 63%, and it's showing a little more life. It's over the 60% threshold, but of course it has to stay there. If it doesn't stay there, then it won't pass. And the real surprise, in my view, is the fact that the abortion measure, the abortion ballot measure, is just a couple ticks under 60%, under the threshold necessary for it to be approved. If that does not turn around, if that does not move forward and go past 60% and stay there, then Florida would be something of an outlier. Many of these abortion ballot measures across the country have been approved by voters, even in red states like Kansas. We've seen these ballot measures pass. I do suspect that both, it's probably even or maybe a little better than even shot that both pass, largely because if the Kamala Harris campaign is really successful in driving turnout, many of the Democrats who are going to come to the polls to support the Harris ticket are very likely to vote for the recreational marijuana use ballot measure, as well as the abortion rights ballot measure. Both of those are backed very solidly by Democrats, and the Democrats who come out to vote for Kamala Harris are very likely to support both of those ballot measures. So we could see them crash on, slip on over 60%.
I thought it was interesting, Wayne, that marijuana was above 60, but abortion was below. And it seems like marijuana, though, has more bipartisan support than abortion rights. Obviously, Republicans, the party has been defined for decades by their opposition to abortion rights and by trying to make abortion illegal or at least harder. But with marijuana, we've seen maybe more bipartisan support. You have lawmakers like Matt Gaetz here in Florida who actually came out against this recreational marijuana amendment, but he came out against it more on process, and he said it shouldn't be in the Constitution, that it should be something that lawmakers decide in the legislature. But he has been fairly supportive of, he was one of the architects of Florida's medical marijuana law. He is an uber Trumper, one of Trump's closest allies in Florida. So, that's interesting. Then you also had Joe Gruters, who is a state senator and the former chair of the Republican Party of Florida, and also an uber Trumper, one of Trump's earliest supporters in Florida. He just came out in favor of the recreational marijuana amendment and said that he supports it, which was really kind of a big deal. What does that tell you? It seems like the marijuana issue is more Republicans are more open to that than abortion, and maybe that's the reason it's polling better.
It does seem to have, the issue seems to cross party lines. There's a lot of support for recreational marijuana usage. It's been passed in so many different states. I was recently in California. Of course, it's passed out there. It's been passed all over the place. And I do think that Florida, it's a popular ballot measure here in Florida. I think the fact that both parties are, leaders in both parties support this ballot measure, you can see that in the 63%. And I actually think that 63% may well rise, and it may well pass with a stronger margin than the 63% that it's at right now. Because again, it's, recreational marijuana use is just not seen as some sin anymore. It's just seen as something that people do for recreation and for medicinal purposes.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty good sign for that amendment when you have the former chair of the Republican Party of Florida supporting it. Now, DeSantis is opposing it, and he says he's going to campaign against it. So a strong opposition campaign could be a factor, but it just seems like grassroots Republicans are much less concerned about marijuana use. I've been to some Trump rallies, and you can smell marijuana in the air. People are smoking marijuana at Trump rallies. So, it's one of those issues where the MAGA base is not, against it, and many of them are probably for it. So I think it has a good shot. Up next, votes are already coming in ahead of Florida's August 20th primary.
Yeah.
Well, while we look ahead to the November ballot, voting already is underway here in Florida for the August 20th primary. There aren't any high-profile contests in this primary, but there are plenty of important races nonetheless for Congress, the legislature, local offices like school board, where DeSantis, again, is really making a lot of endorsements and trying to swing education policy in a more conservative direction. Mark, what should people be watching for in this primary that happens next week?
There are definitely some interesting races, and I think one of the ones I'm interested in is the Democratic race for U.S. Senate. We haven't hardly heard much at all about this race, but Debbie Merkersell Powell has been, considered the front runner. But I do think that Stanley Campbell, who's a businessman, a tech entrepreneur, has a very interesting background. I think he's made some good impressions on Democrats across the state. So it'll be interesting to see if he can, pull together the kind of coalition that Andrew Gillum did when he was a gubernatorial candidate in 2018. I think that the primary election, in some counties, the primary election really is the election because, St. John's, I was talking to the St. John's County Republican Party chair, Denver Cook, and he made that point that, St. John's County is so Republican that, the competitive Republican races are pretty much going to determine the winner.
Right. That is a good point. There's a lot of races that are going to be on local ballots tomorrow that are going to determine who's in office. The school board races, these nonpartisan school board races, if you only have two candidates and you don't have, more than that, then there's no runoff. That's just decided in the primary as well. And these school board races have been hot tickets in recent years, as you've seen all this activism around COVID policies and some of the other, the book policies in schools. These have become some of the most high-profile races in communities.
Yeah, DeSantis has weighed in on some of these school board races again this year. So of course we'll take note of how successful his efforts to throw support behind some of these conservative school board candidates will be. But I'm also really closely watching a race in Northeast Florida, state Senate race. I think it may be the most money spent on a legislative race in Florida history. This is State Senate District 7. The House Appropriations Chair, Tom Leek, is actually trying to move to the Senate. And he's opposed by the St. Johns County Sheriff, former St. Johns County Sheriff David Shore, and another Christian conservative named Jerry James. And these candidates and their supporters have probably spent more than $10 million.
Wow, $10 million on a state Senate race. That's incredible.
Yeah. A lot of it on TV ads. These guys have been on TV, in Jacksonville and Orlando.
What are the issues? So this is a Republican primary. Are they all trying to hug close to Trump? Like, I'm curious as to a legislative primary like this that's hotly contested. What are the key issues in the race?
Well, they are all trying to out-Trump each other, but what's fascinating to me about this race is that Leak has gotten the backing of the Ron DeSantis and pretty much the Tallahassee establishment. and David Shore actually landed the Trump endorsement. Meanwhile, the Trump Club in St. Johns County endorsed Leak, and the Republican Party in St. Johns County endorsed Jerry James. So
you got some intra-MAGA warfare going on here.
This is the heart of the fight. So yeah. Absolutely.
Wayne, any primary races that you're watching in your area, or anything that stands out to you about this primary next week?
I'm particularly interested in who wins the right to take on Rick Scott. And the Senate race. Scott, as you might know, is contemplating a run for Senate Majority Leader if he's reelected. Sure. His margins have been very, very small. When he won the governorship, it was by the thinnest of margins. When he defeated Bill Nelson, also again the thinnest of margins. So we see a candidate who has not run up big numbers in Florida, and again, that could be a surprisingly competitive race if former Congresswoman Powell is able to get past that primary and mount a big challenge. That could have some surprises, and that would be a fascinating race.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And the USA Today poll that was out this week showed that Scott his favorability rating in Florida is pretty low. And so if there was a vulnerable incumbent out there, he would be one of them for sure if the Democrats could make Florida competitive. So it
would be a political earthquake if that race were to flip to blue. That would scramble all of the calculations the Republicans have made about trying to win back control of the Senate. It would be a political earthquake. The odds would have to still be in Scott's favor, but that race could be surprisingly competitive.
And he has sort of an unlimited amount of money that he's been able to pump in. And if he ever has any warning signs, he just starts dumping money in and upping his advertising. And we've seen that he has started to put some money into his campaign here. So there's a lot of interesting races to watch next week. These are important. Some of them, like Mark said, these races will be decided in the primary. So an important election date coming up. We'll leave it at that, though. Mark, Wayne, thank you so much for joining the show. It was really great. That wraps up another episode of Inside Florida Politics. I want to thank our production guru, Rob Landers, and thanks to all of you for listening. We're out of here.